mess as well as hers, isn't it?
Well, it's all our mess.
You go into a war, you don't know how it's going to end.
Can Southern District of New York put the president in jail?
James Fields Jr., the man who drove into a crowd of counter-protesters at a Charlottesville white supremacist rally in 2017, changed his plea for 29 federal hate crime charges to guilty. In exchange, prosecutors agreed not to seek the death penalty. Fields was already facing a life sentence following his conviction in December for the murder of Heather Heyer. Facebook says it's extending its ban on posts supporting white supremacy to include white nationalism and white separatism. The company had previously argued there was a distinction, saying some forms of nationalism are acceptable, like American pride. But now Facebook says that after speaking with civil rights advocates, they recognize that the ideologies are inseparable. China has kicked the former president of Interpol out of the Communist Party and is prosecuting him for charges that include bribery. Meng Hongwei was feared missing 6 months ago, while China waited 3 days to reveal he was being detained. Meng is the latest official caught in President Xi Jinping's anti-corruption campaign. Yesterday, the former head of internet censorship was sentenced to 14 years for bribery.
भारत ने आज अपना नाम अंतरिक्ष महाशक्ति स्पेस पावर के रूप में दर्ज करा दिया है.
India's Prime Minister says the country successfully shot down one of its satellites with a missile. If true, India joins the US, Russia, and China as the only countries with anti-satellite weapons. The timing is great for Modi, who's up for re-election in just over 2 weeks.
Today, Brexit finally broke Prime Minister Theresa May when she announced to her colleagues that she'll stand down and make way for a new leader if they back her deal. This may prove to be enough to get her withdrawal agreement across the line, but not even that is a given, just 2 days before the original Brexit deadline.
The objective we should all have is being able to deliver Brexit and guarantee delivering Brexit to the British people.
The EU offered a slight reprieve last week when it agreed to delay the looming cliff edge until April the 12th. With one major catch. The UK will only get the full extension it wants if it can show it has a Brexit deal that will get majority support.
The fate of Brexit is in the hands of our British friends. We are, as the EU, we are prepared for the worst, but hope for the best.
For months now, May has tried to push her own deal through, the only deal that the EU is on board with. And she's failed twice.
It is clear that the House does not support this deal, but tonight's vote tells us nothing about what it does support. Nothing about how.
Ironically, her promise to quit, even though she's not given a date, might give her deal its best shot.
I'm going to vote for her deal in order to get it over the line, in order that we can then leave the European Union and do all the things that she said at Prime Minister's Questions today. The last thing I want is to have an extended Article 50 that we have to fight the European Union elections.
A proposition which is the same or substantially the same may not be brought forward again during the same parliamentary session. I understand that the government may be thinking of bringing meaningful vote 3 before the House either tomorrow or even on Friday. I do expect the government to meet the test of change.
But it might be too little too late for the beleaguered Prime Minister, because on Monday, Parliament, with the support of many MPs in May's own party, voted to take matters into its own hands, forcing an extremely rare session, where it's MPs, rather than the government, who get to run the show. So today, MPs voted on 8 of their own options for how Brexit should proceed. Everything from leaving with no deal, cancelling Brexit altogether, or the less nuclear option of giving the public a vote on any final deal.
It's the British people who should now decide what comes next.
But this proved to be an exercise in overconfidence. All 8 motions were voted down, proving there is simply no majority for any way to execute Brexit. Earlier in the day, MPs were rushing to try to cast themselves as Brexit's great saviours.
This is the first time today we as members of Parliament, on literally the 11th hour, we've had to battle to seize control of the House, control of the agenda in order to vote.
But it's your mess as well as hers, isn't it?
Well, it's all our mess, and we hope that we can now try and sort it out tonight.
In fact, things are about to get even messier. Not only did Parliament fail to reveal any kind of majority, May's coalition partners in Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party announced tonight that they won't back her deal even if she quits. Still, she has little choice but to press on with her humiliating sales pitch, hoping that enough MPs want her gone that they're willing to hold their noses and vote with her to make it happen, and deliver Brexit in the process. Right now, that doesn't seem likely.
For the past 2 nights, Israel has pummeled the Gaza Strip with rocket fire.
ما لقينا الا العماره بتجري بالشارع اجرينا حافيين وبيتنا برا وجينا لقينا الدمار اللي انت شايفه لا في ظهور ولا في شنطه مدرسه ولا في اي حاجه يا امي فيش اولاد بنتي صاروا 5 وابوهم وامهم بالشارع احنا نمنا بالشارع احنا الصغار هذول ناموا بالشارع وشحتوا هدمه يدفوا فيها ما فيش حاجه.
Israel's responding to 2 days of attacks from Hamas rockets. Sari Alvin lives near the house where 7 people were injured in the initial rocket fire from Gaza.
Peace. We have to sit with the Palestinians and to talk and to talk and to talk until it will be peace. Only when 2 people, even the great enemies, will sit together and talk together, the peace can appear from this.
But a new poll out today shows that most Israelis aren't in the mood for peace talks right now. They want Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to retaliate more aggressively. And according to Israeli analysts, that's hard for him to do because he's up for re-election on April 9th.
I do think that there's political pressure on Netanyahu to do more.
Isn't that a dangerous game to be playing?
It is
making
dangerous.
decisions based on elections?
I hope, as an Israeli citizen, I hope that that's not the reason for the decisions.
Do you think how he responds to the current situation could have a real impact on the election?
It's very possible that the response to the situation, again, in either direction, whether it's a war or de-escalating, could have a huge influence on the outcome.
One way it could influence the election is by distracting the public from corruption charges that Netanyahu's facing. He's accused of, among other things, cutting a deal with a news outlet for favourable coverage and accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars in gifts from foreign billionaires. Renewed tensions with Hamas could also give him the opportunity to convince undecided voters that he's strongest on security, especially important given who's in the opposition.
His opposing party has 3 former chiefs of staff of the Israeli military. And so in theory, they're able to hit him in the spot where Netanyahu is supposed to be strongest, which is on security issues. They're real contenders.
Netanyahu's also got a crucial boost from Washington. This week, President Trump signed a proclamation that the US will now recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. The Prime Minister has now called up more reserve infantry and artillery units and moved Israeli tanks to the Gaza border. But escalating the standoff could create new problems.
A lot of political opposition are saying to Netanyahu he needs to go to war. He needs to show that he's tough on Hamas. But then at the end of the day, when there's war, there's casualties, and that's not going to look great as well.
I really think Netanyahu is in a lose-lose situation. I mean, in theory, one hopes he makes the decision based on, strategic interests for Israel, but politically, it's, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because you go into a war, you don't know how it's going to end.
Democrats are now asking one of President Trump's accountants for 10 years of financial records, according to a letter released today by the chair of the Oversight Committee. Their investigation is just one of many ongoing congressional efforts to dig into this president and his life. Robert Mueller's investigation is over, but investigating Trumpworld is still going on, all over the country. In New York, investigators are looking into the Trump Organization and its charity, how they get loans, made bids, and presented themselves to insurance companies. The attorneys general in Maryland and Washington, D.C. are accusing Trump, through his D.C. hotel, of accepting illegal gifts from foreign governments. New Jersey is looking at how Trump's golf clubs ended up hiring undocumented immigrants. Prosecutors in D.C. are looking into campaign advisor Roger Stone's connection with WikiLeaks. And the feds in New Jersey and D.C. have subpoenaed records from Trump's inaugural committee. But the biggest threats to this White House may be the federal prosecutors at the Southern District of New York. They're also looking into foreign donations to his inaugural committee, plus his super PAC, and whether Trump directed hush money payments to 2 women. And those are just the cases we know about. The SDNY was founded before the Supreme Court. Its 150 prosecutors are independent, aggressive, and not bound by the narrow scope that Mueller was. 2 SDNY prosecutors happen to have left the office recently, which means they're free to talk about what makes SDNY such a threat to Trump, even if the Mueller report isn't.
You've been married for how long?
How long are you married? Let's see if we get this right.
12 years, right?
I'll go with 12.
Very legal.
12 years. 12 years.
Tell me about what it is like to work at a place with a reputation like the SDNY has, and why would somebody want to go work just at that district?
It's known as a very aggressive office. You know, in some districts you might have a more limited docket, but SDNY has everything from gangs cases to terrorism cases to securities fraud cases.
And the appeal is what? Just because that's the best?
The biggest, most high-profile, most important cases for the country that go on. There's Madoff, the counterterrorism cases, Osama bin Laden, the organized crime cases, the Genovese crime family. All those cases came from the Southern District of New York. So if you want to be doing big name cases with all that pressure, that's where you go.
Do the SDNY investigators care at all about the Mueller report? Are they looking at it? Are they focused on it? Does it matter to them?
I mean, they care, right?
Yeah.
So they care about the Mueller report. Obviously, they're going to read it, but their investigations are still separate and they're independent, and that's going to chug along whatever happens with the Mueller report.
But would the prosecutors in New York still get a chance to see or understand what Mueller has discovered, even if, Congress and the news doesn't see what's in that report?
I think so, yeah.
If it's relevant to what they're investigating, if there's something relevant to what the Southern District of New York is doing, then absolutely, I think that they would see those portions that are relevant.
The Judiciary Committee will come to order.
Does having Congress get involved, does that change how things work in those investigations?
The main difference is Southern District of New York can charge somebody and send somebody to jail after a trial. Congress, they're going to send out subpoenas. They're going to try to get people to talk to them. But what can they do? Really, nothing. There's no real consequence necessarily to what they do.
Thank you for inviting me here today.
When Michael Cohen testified to Congress, do you think prosecutors are watching him on TV in Congress being like, oh man, can you just not, this is just not helpful to me at all? Or are they like, great, look at all this new great stuff that we got?
I mean, it's unusual that he's talking so much and continuing to cooperate.
My view is what he's trying to do is get a Rule 35. And what a Rule 35 is, I've been sentenced and I'm going to still try to cooperate. And then go back to the judge under Rule 35 and say, hey, judge, can you reduce my sentence? Because I've helped out some more. So I think that's his motivation.
Right, it's a resentencing.
It's a resentencing.
If someone came to you, you guys are still back at the office, they said, look, this inauguration thing, this is your thing. What do you start to do to build a case?
We're going to start with bank records. That's where all of these financial crimes cases start, or with the bank records.
And so in the practical sense, that means you subpoena the bank, or
yes.
You subpoena the bank, you subpoena the inaugural committee to see who paid, you subpoena all the people who paid, and then you start hauling them in, getting their records, and then figuring it out. You're getting towards a charging decision when you have witnesses. I don't care what anyone says, you can't build a case just on documents. You're not going to trial just on documents, where you're just putting documents in front of a jury. So really what you want are people to explain the documents to you and explain the conversations around the documents and tell you what happened. Something like this, you'd want some strong witnesses on Team America before you charge.
Another one that comes up all the time as we talk about this stuff is Trump's former CFO, Alan Weisselberg. He did some plea deal with the Southern District. People who don't like the president were very excited. Oh, like this is the guy. And then we found out there was a limited plea deal and people were less excited. Help me understand the steps of what we know about that plea deal and what it might be.
Actually, what he got was immunity, which isn't even a plea deal. Frankly, from a defense attorney's perspective, it's the gold standard. If you get your client immunity, that means they go into the grand jury and whatever they say can't be used against them. He only had immunity to go into the grand jury to talk about specific things. So if there are other things that they're looking at that they didn't talk about, then he could be in jeopardy.
You know, the guy whose picture is hanging on your office wall, the president, is the guy that you're investigating. What is that like for people to be involved in something like that? It's not normal, right? It doesn't come up that much.
No, it's not normal.
Not normal.
But that's part of the thrill of the job, is that you are so independent that, right? I mean, it sounds cheesy, but nobody's above the law.
So can Southern District of New York put the president in jail?
Well, I mean, everybody talks about the DOJ guidance and that you shouldn't indict a sitting president. So there is that guidance out there. Do they have to follow it? No. Would they be encouraged to follow it? Probably.
Could it happen in the future based on the investigations that are going on? Whether you have enough time on the statute of limitations, that's another question.
He could be charged just like any other citizen. Any other person could be charged.
And for things he had done while president?
Yes. As long as you have a crime within the statute of limitations, right? All crimes become time barred at some point, but as long as you're not time barred from bringing it, absolutely.
Do you have any feeling about where things are headed with this prosecution and what might happen next in it?
I think we're going to see some indictments, but no, that's really, that's about, I just exhausted my predictive knowledge.
And do you have any sense of whether or not this is the kind of case that keeps growing and growing, or one that looks like it's coming towards the end?
I think it continues on, that there are more leads has been reported every day, and those are leads that they're going to keep looking at. I don't see an end coming, because once you open an investigation and start down that path, you're compelled to, figure it out.
Hey, I'm Andrew Bird, and I'll be talking about the song Sisyphus.
Sisyphus peered into the mist, a stone's throw from the precipice paused. Did he jump or did he fall as he gazed into the morning mist?
Sisyphus was this Greek king that was punished by the gods for trying to outsmart death. He was sentenced to a lifetime of rolling a rock up a hill, only to have it roll back down as soon as he gets to the top. The song opens with this whistle. And I wanted to make the most like rock and roll badass whistle melody, like wind in the hair. I kept picturing a scene from Easy Rider, when they're in the desert, just vast open spaces and glorious scenes. This whole record is more acoustic piano than I've ever had on a record. Piano can be tricky. It's the wrong kind of filigree. It can take you somewhere else. What I would say is a standout on this track is the bass. On a lot of Studio One reggae records, they would mic the back of the amp instead of the front. And maybe that's why you get the feeling of that attack and that boom, boom, kind of bubbly sound. Ba-da-da-da-da-dum. Something like this could get really classic rock jangly if you're not careful. So rhythmically, I'm just playing chicka-chan, 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 chicka, like a cowbell. I actually don't do this very often, but I doubled my own vocal, which is kind of something you hear in a lot of 70s rock and roll.
I'd rather fail like a monal than flail like a god on a lightning rod. History forgets the moderates.
When you've got these kind of syllabic, rhythmic lyrics, it can take a line that seems thrown away and it can make it sound twice as intentional. When I go in to make a record, I like things to be sort of ritualistic, like something real is happening. This is not another day. Sometimes you ends up fetishizing the equipment around you, believing that there's ghosts in these old tube machines and these compressors. And I know deep down that it's really not what it's all about, but it's kind of part of the religion of making a record.
Sisyphus peered into the mist, a stone's throw from a precipice. Paul.